Hey, what's up, Rec students? Frank here from AFP with a super interesting topic today. Today we're going to be talking about the modern day pop star, the modern day singer, and we're going to be talking about Autotune. So, what does the modern day pop star kind of look like? Well, I'm going to give you what I think is the quintessential pop star of the 20 teens and now the 2020s. So, we got artists like Lady Gaga, Rihanna, Billie Eilish, Adele, Sam Smith. And those are all artists that are amazing singers. And Rihanna especially, I want to talk a little bit about her. When I first heard Rihanna, I kind of wasn't expecting the future that she had. She kind of had like a thicker native tongue in the beginning of her career, and I feel like that was something that I really admired about her and I really liked about her. She had this really like, I like the way she blended her culture's music within pop music in America, and just the way she sang, and the way, I think the first hit she ever had was Turn the Music Up, or something of I think it's about something about a DJ, but I remember that my mom bought that album, and she brought it back to the house, and she had that one hit that was like super dancey and got you moving, and it was a great hit. But the rest of the songs on that album, I remember, were really fresh, and it was like a new approach to pop music. And I remember thinking wow, this is different, and I think I was probably 11 or 12 maybe. But later on, she went on to doing songs with Kanye West, like Umbrella, and having Love on the Brain, which is more I think a song like Love on the Brain was more bluesy and a different approach to Rihanna's music. And I really admire that she took that vintage vibe and did a slow guitar ballad song, or sorry, not so much a ballad, but it was a blues, it was definitely a blues song, and I felt it when I heard her sing those songs. And I think she also, like Usher, who's another pop one all the way up there. He went from being this R&B artist to being this kind of house artist who was making dance club music, and completely changed his style, and went through transformations. I know he came out from the early 90s because he was a part of the Mickey Mouse Club, and he just evolved as an artist and went through so many transformations. And I'm not really an Usher fan. I don't listen to a lot of his music, but I know he's popular enough to know that, yeah, he's been through so many transformations. So now an artist like Lady Gaga, kind of a similar path where, she started off in a backwards fashion, where she was already poppy when she went into the scene. She kind of had her outfit. She had these super glam pop hits that were what's one, Poker Face. That one was all, I remember I was just talking to my lady about it. I was in Virgin Records when that song first came out, and I remember hearing it in Virgin Records. That was one of my last memories in Virgin Records, was hearing Lady Gaga's hit kind of blow up, and just being wow, if you're being played in Virgin Records, you must be the it. So yeah, now if you look at Lady Gaga's career, it's very it's a little more folky. There's a little more rock elements. It's the music is calmed down but gotten more personal. I feel you really get to see Lady Gaga as I don't know how to express this. You get to see her more human side, and her the more personal side of her. I feel when we first met Lady Gaga, it was pop, 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 outfit change, tabloids, and now she's a respected actor. She's a great singer-songwriter. She's made music in movies. She's been a part of TV shows. It's she just became this not only pop culture icon, but this all around superstar. So now when we look at these type of singers, we kind of notice that they all have this like certain stage persona, and their music has this certain element about it that makes them kind of sound all around perfect. And one of those elements that attributes to making them sound perfect is called autotune. Autotune is something that Autotune is a device or facility for tuning something that is out of tune. It could be a computer software that enables the correction of an out of tune vocal performance. So Autotune is in our, in today's society, today's musical world, has been this thing that's just, it's like a double-edged sword in the music world. Like it's super helpful for, those who are into hip hop, and for those who are, into pop. It kind of just gives us that sound we are trying to achieve naturally. Now, I just kind of want to get into a little bit of the history of autotune. If you grew up in the early thousands, and you were listening and paying attention to music, you'll know that T-Pain, Rihanna, Madonna, Kanye West, like even Snoop Dogg at one point was like really utilizing this vocal effect, and it kind of became the sound of an era for people who love hip hop and love pop. So I just kind of want to go back in time and talk a little bit about where autotune came from. So ever since 1997, autotune has made its way into almost every genre of music. The 90s was a pretty heavy time for music. It was, I mean, like the 80s itself was kind of like the foreground for all this beautiful, like, music to come after. Like, you would have, in the 80s we had new wave, we had alternative rock, which was really blowing up, we had underground punk, it was with ska, all these things. And if you were a pop star in the 80s, you kind of had a leeway into the 90s. You kind of already had like your foot in the door, because the technology was at almost at its peak, especially for music. So this autotune, the technology, was originally created by an engineer named Andy Hildberg. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, so if you know, correct me in the comments. But autotune wasn't the first pitch correcting device to be brought into the music world. The talk box came 50 years before autotune. And basically what you would do in the earlier versions of the talk box, it was kind of like a resonator device where you could like put it underneath your throat, and it, our vocal cords are here, and if you put your hands right here, you can kind of feel it vibrate. So the talk box would kind of vibrate and create this like really weird alien-like voice. Later versions of the talk box used a plastic tube to direct vocals to an instrument. So, if you listen to Stevie Wonder in the 70s, you could kind of catch him on a track using this like really like almost clavinet sounding vocal effect. Well, that's because he was using that talk box. It was connected to his keyboard instrument. So he could manipulate his voice and play the keyboards and play whatever his voice was saying on the keys at the same time. So it's kind of like if you were talking through the piano. It's really cool. And you can find this, find these effects on GarageBand and on any type of DAW, basically. And there are a lot of virtual units that exist that allow you to do those type of effects. But yeah, the talk box became an essential element to West Coast hip hop. If you listen to Dr. Dre and all of the NWA stuff, and after, like when he started working with Tupac, and like when West Coast was blowing up, and Death Row was kind of just ruling the world, that sound was so essential to that style of hip hop, you know. And I think, personally, I'm from the East Coast, but I've always had a super special love for West Coast rap because it just has this like really dope element to it. And, a lot of people, especially a lot of old heads that really like, hip hop, a lot of hip hop old heads will say, oh, East Coast all day or West Coast all day. I can't really choose because I'm a musical lover. Like, I love everything that is music, so I can't really pick what sounds better because Biggie Smalls has this really funky heaviness to him, and like Dr. Dre and all of the Death Row rappers have their own like, flavor to the way they make music. But back to the talk box, it was essential to West Coast rap, and it kind of, if you've listened to the song California Love, which was a song that was produced by Dr. Dre that featured Tupac on it, or had Tupac on it. I don't think it was a feature. I think they just made that song together. Yeah. So, the talk box was developed in 1968 and by Robert Moog. Sorry, excuse me, not by Robert Moog. In 1968, the next thing after the talk box that was, I guess the next step in technology was the vocoder, which was developed by Robert Moog. That is the correct explanation of that. And bands, if you listen to like later 90s music, bands like Daft Punk, like, use the vocoder as the basis of their musical flavor, Daft Punk is one of those things that is just so heavy to get into, and they were like the Gorillas to me. They're like the Gorillas before the Gorillas in the way. Totally different type of music, but like their style is so heavy, and the visuals that go along and the characters that go along with the music are so heavy that you kind of like think that they're making those voices naturally from their mask, and they're just these super beings that are playing these instruments that we've never seen before. But no, they're using the vocoder, and it's a pretty cool studio trick. And in 1998, Cher released a song called Believe. If you don't know who Cher is, that's okay. Check her out. She's a pretty interesting musician. I know a lot of people who are diehard Cher fans. She was the sound of an era. She was the sound of the 90s, along with Madonna and those and Gwen Stefani and all those like songs that were kind of just songs about feeling great and feeling like you're at a party and dancing. Believe, the song, if you've never heard it, it sounds like this. Do you believe in life after love? Was one of the first songs to commercially use Autotune. Like, it was the song that just kind of brought everyone's attention to, wow, like, how is Cher, who, by the way, again, is an amazing singer on her own without Autotune. If you listen to her 80s stuff, like, you understand why she's so freaking famous. And she had her own show and blah blah blah. She had a band literally before her own show. But to think that she had lasted all those years from the early 60s on to the 90s, and grab something like Autotune and turn everyone's attention to that is pretty insane. Like, she really knocked it out of the park with the release of Believe, because everybody wanted to understand, like, man, how is she doing that? How is she like achieving that? So I'm pretty sure what happened after that is engineers that were famous, that were working with famous names, were like, oh snap, we got to get these devices in the studio, we got to have more of this. So artists later on, like, we're going into the thousands now, like 2001, 2002, 2003, artists like J-Lo and T-Pain took inspiration from Cher's use of Autotune on Belief, because it was just revolutionary to pop music sound. So T-Pain released, I think he released that song, Gonna Buy You a Drink, and J-Lo released a couple of songs with the use of Autotune. It kind of just like the vocal effects started gaining a respect from the musical world, and people around. Like, it was like, oh snap, that's pretty cool. But then artists like Kanye West and some of the newer 2008 rappers started coming out and I guess overusing it, and it became something that was getting negative criticisms from people that were, music, you know, enthusiasts. And personally, it's funny that we're talking about Kanye. I'm actually a huge fan of Kanye. I know he has a lot to say that he shouldn't say, and he should keep his, you know, he should mind his own business. But his the way he develops music and the way he produces his stuff and works with other artists and other hip hop artists is super unique to me, because I just think his workflow and the way his music sounds like it's just revolutionary to our generation, my generation of listeners, because it just sounds completely different. It sounds fresh to me compared to most of the hip hop artists of today. But he was one of the figures that kind of overused Autotune. If you listen to the album 808 Heartbreak or Life of Pablo, you kind of just like really, like you kind of get it. But at the same time, there are songs that I think, what is it? Runaway. I really appreciate Kanye's use of Autotune on that song, because at the end of that song, it sounds like he's playing a guitar with his vocals. It sounds like really thick and something that you just never would have thought of doing with a microphone. I'm pretty sure he's like kissing the microphone. He's singing at a super low like register, but that microphone gain is all the way up. And we were talking about this in the previous videos, like watching your microphone gain. But like I said before, there's no rules to recording vocals. And yeah, so just the way he recorded it was so sick, and I just love completely how they mixed that whole album. So basically that's that is the journey between the Autotune history. Like, from just to recap on that, it's just since 1997, Autotune has just made its way into our musical world, and it's kind of revolutionized the way we make music. But it's not the first time we've heard something like Autotune. Like, it's not the first time in history. Autotune has been something since the 50s. It just wasn't called Autotune. It was called the talkbox, and then in the 60s it was called the vocoder. And once that happened to the rock and roll world and the R&B world, people were using that in funk, people were using that in rock, metal. Bon Jovi's use of the talkbox, what is it, Living on a Prayer. I really had a brain fart there. But yeah, like, it's pretty cool. There's no, I like to always say this, there's no rules to recording great music. It's just about your approach and how you are going to go about it. Now, I want to talk about the way I use Autotune and how I incorporate it into my mixes. And so real quickly, just to give you a little history on my usage of Autotune, I didn't use Autotune before 2 years ago. I had something called pitch correction, which if you've been exploring GarageBand, both on your iPhone and in the computer, you come across it in your editing window for audio tracks. The unfortunate thing is you cannot pitch correct and flex audio at the same time. I think GarageBand only offers one or the other. At least my version of GarageBand, I have a pretty out-of-date version, but yeah, pitch correction for me was one of the first introductions to like, oh snap, like I don't need to sound good. That idea, like I don't have to sound completely good to, make great music. The unfortunate thing is that's kind of wrong. You want, when you record music, you want to sound as good as you can be. So you give the engineer, or if you're the engineer, you give yourself room to work with and blend yourself in. And when I say as good as you can be, I mean microphone is leveled correctly, you're not popping, you're not clipping, and your sentences are clear, you're landing on downbeats with your pronunciation, everything is on time. If you're doing overdubs, your tracks sound tight, like you don't sound like you're too late or early on certain syllables. Yeah, so how Autotune could play an effect on that, how I use Autotune is, if let's say I'm singing a harmony with myself or someone else, and I'm not I'm not landing on a note correctly, I would use Autotune to, and not completely, like I wouldn't like, all right, load an Autotune device on and like max it out. I would kind of massage it in, because what hip hop artists are doing and what Cher was doing is, you do the vocals as best you can and you crank the Autotune and it's just bam on your track. It's completely, you're completely a robot now. I don't really like to do that. Like, I don't, in my music, there's really no need I haven't found a need for it. So I just, if I sing a part that I like the take and it's like, oh snap, like that one little note is, it's bothering me. How can I get it? I will use Autotune just to hair it out and just, like a pencil eraser, if you're just kind of erasing that and just smoothing it in. So that's the way I use Autotune. Also, like, I don't like using Autotune on, I mean, like, I've tried this to fix a problem. It doesn't really work. I'm just telling you. I don't like to use Autotune on choruses. Like, if we have like a lot of people on one track, there's like an ensemble on one track, it just sounds weird, and it just, I feel like Autotune is mostly a fun effect. It's to add flavor to an instrument or add flavor to your vocals, and could be used to smoothen out some like pitch edges, like, some rough pitch edges, like, if you have like some trouble with a certain way that you're singing a song, you can use Autotune to smoothen it out. But like, I never really use it excessively, because it just it just becomes a little too much for me. But artists that, like the artists that we were talking about earlier, Lady Gaga, Rihanna, Billie Eilish, Adele, Sam Smith, have found ways to do both, use it overwhelmingly, and people like Sam Smith, who sing kind of quieter and more reserved, sing with a little less Autotune on it. And I'm not saying Autotune is something that is used to cheat. I just, because I don't like to think of anything like in a negative way like that. I feel like Autotune is something that is used to enhance your pitch. It's used to, and like, if necessary, if completely necessary. I believe that those rappers and those artists that we were just talking about earlier, who are prime examples of the use of Autotune, were using it because it's fun to listen to. It's actually an attractive sound, to become one with electronic music, to bridge the gap between human and analog, and something that's not like, it doesn't have a heartbeat, is pretty sick. So I don't knock it. I say use it. If you have it and you want to try it out, go ahead. You can find versions of like I said, Stevie Wonder using it, Michael Jackson uses it on PYT. So it's like, I don't knock anything. You just gotta really, don't let something be your norm. Don't use it all the time. Like, find ways to actually sing and be you. And, those are the things that, to me, I feel are the most like, the things that attract me the most is when I hear the singer themselves, and like, I can hear just your natural voice. Like, I think, like, everybody's using Autotune, but it is definitely available, and it's definitely for you to use, and you should, come across it and try it out sometime. Don't knock it until you try it. And on that note, that concludes my little powwow about Autotune and its effect in pop culture. And if you have any questions or comments about other type of artists that have used Autotune, or how you can use Autotune for an instrument, please hit me up in the comments, and I'll try to respond as soon as I can. All right, you guys have a great Tuesday, and I'll see you 2 days from now with a lesson on guitar. Have a good one.